Hello and welcome back to Scottish Independence Podcasts.
This is another of our countdown to Holyrood 2026 interviews, and this time we're going to be talking with Martyn Day. We first met Martyn in Linlithgow, didn't we? It maybe was a couple of years back.
Yes, it was a Believe in Scotland Day of Action in Linlithgow town centre. I think we interviewed him actually at the time.
Yeah, we did. We did a wee chat with him, didn't he? He was very amenable to that, and fortunately he still is, although he's really busy just now. So he's standing as the SNP candidate in Falkirk East and Linlithgow.
And we are really pleased that he took the time to speak to us, because he'd come in from a whole day's door knocking and it was 8:30 at night when we interviewed him. So he was probably completely knackered, but he didn't show at all. He was perfectly...
No, it was really a good conversation.
So let's go over and speak to Martyn. Welcome to our guest, Martyn Day, who is the SNP candidate for... Now you tell us who you're standing for.
This is the first test to see how punch drunk I am. I am standing for the Scottish Parliament constituency of Falkirk East and Linlithgow. And I am sure at some stage in the campaign, I am going to get that the wrong way round, because I did 9 years as the MP for Linlithgow and East Falkirk. Exactly the same words in the opposite order. About to slip off. Although thankfully, when you're writing emails back to people, you're typing... I'm typing the name of the constituency at the bottom, because I'm conscious that a lot of folk are writing to regional candidates as well as constituency ones. So I think I'm training myself to get the correct constituency.
Well, at least it's the right words, and if not in the right order.
Well, that's right. I figured if I do get it wrong, most folk won't even notice.
So how is it going back and canvassing when you've already been there as the MP? Of course, is it different?
Yeah, well, the boundaries are slightly different as well. Obviously, my old seat straddled more of the West Lothian part, so I only have Linlithgow out of West Lothian, and there's a couple of bits in the Falkirk side that I didn't have. So 75% of the seat is familiar to me, and I'm familiar to a lot of them. So, you know, there's a lot of doors where you knock and they can address you by name. So that's a positive sign, you know. Doesn't always mean they're supporting us, but they know who we are, and that I think gives an advantage in this kind of contest. I think one of the really positive things about this campaign is how early in advance the party got its candidates in place for constituencies. So we were all in place a full year before, and what that meant is we had last summer and good weather and light nights to get out and round bit constituency. So I spent most of that time going round the parts that I didn't represent before, and getting myself known and meeting a lot of people. So I think that was a real godsend. Had that been later in the year and in the winter, you would not have been able to get around as much as we did. So full marks to the party organisers for making sure that happened in good time. We always talk before every election. We need people in place sooner, and up until now I don't think that's really happened, but it has happened this time. So
are you finding a different vibe with this election from the last one?
Thankfully, yes.
Yes, I was just going to say, because of course you lost the last one. Yeah. I mean, really, presumably, I mean, that must be such a turnaround in Scotland, you know, from how people voted in 2024.
Yes. It's fair to say that the last sort of decade and a bit in Scottish politics has been highly volatile, and I've lived through the positive side of that and the negative side of that, and now we're into almost like another phase. So there's a lot of our traditional supporters last time round voted Labour to get rid of the Tories.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
And you know, I thought that was kind of bonkers, because we were the last line of defence, and I think a lot of people now realise that they've lost that last line of defence. So some of our former supporters have came back. So it's much more positive. We're still not anywhere near the levels we were at, you know, at the last Scottish Parliament election, so it's not as good as we'd like it to be, but there's room for improvement, and I think the manifesto that was launched and John's energy and leadership gets us in the right place. So we've got time to make sure we make the gains we need.
Certainly. I mean, the polling that's coming out Well, there was one, I think, just very recently that's really positive. I mean, I kind of thought, oh, that's so positive. Maybe it's too positive. I mean, it is showing a likelihood of the SNP having a majority in Holyrood, which, fine if it does. But I have to tell you, Martyn, Fiona and I have spent quite a few podcasts saying that we cannot understand why Mr. Swinney was sort of went along that line, because it seemed unlikely and actually unnecessary. So, but we might have to eat our hat.
It's probably quite a good strategy, because we know that the 2011 vote, where we had a majority, broke the mould and set a precedent. We also know that the two subsequent Scottish Parliament elections had pro-Indie majorities that we didn't manage to break the mould with. So I think it is the dynamic that shifts it. Now, ultimately, the big dynamic we need 50% of the vote, to get independence, and we're not there yet. So this is a stage on the route, and we're making progress, and we're making progress step by step, conversation by conversation, and we just need more people out helping with those conversations. I wish we had more. I think the cities are probably different than my kind of area, but I wish we had more young people. It's fair to say that our activist base is older than it was, because it's the same people that were there at the referendum, and we're all getting that wee bit older. I'm in my mid-50s, which makes me in the younger half, probably. But where are the folk with all the passion and fire in their 20s that we need?
Yeah.
It's a good question, that, because if you look at some of the other parties, they do seem to have a younger profile. The Greens, judging by the march, they seem quite a young profile. SSP has got a lot of young, particularly young men following them. And unfortunately, I think a few of the young men are also in the Reform camp, although that tends to be more the angry old white man bemoaning their loss of overlordship over us annoying women and all those other people who aren't them.
Yes, exactly.
Although there is SNP youth.
There is. I think some of it is to do with the nature of our sort of communities that are a bit more disparate. Because I think back to when I did join the SNP as a teenager, and I would, for years I was one of the youngest, if not the youngest member of our branch. When probably I was the youngest member for about 10 years. So it's not a new phenomenon. I don't know what we do. Cities, they've got the universities, colleges, there's a sort of critical mass of people that can get together. But if you're out in, a mix of rural towns and villages, then there's probably not enough people in your little community to have that critical mass. And then if public transport's not there, or folk don't have their own cars, they can't, even link up 10 mile down the road, which the cities have a very different dynamic. So,
Also, just, that generation of, 18 to 25-year-olds, 30-year-olds, they get their information in different places from, from probably the three of us, although actually I get quite a lot now from social media because I'm looking for it.
You get yours from TikTok.
I know, I get mine from TikTok. But, that does make a difference, doesn't it? Because it's like it's in your hand all the time. You don't have to go to a meeting. You're just going to work, you're on the bus, you can do it that way. So, I mean, hopefully they are kind of taking in information, but certainly not doing it in the way that we used to.
I think they are. I mean, I've had some very detailed conversations with some of the younger voters on the doorstep, so they certainly are aware, and if they've, and they know the questions they want to ask if they have a question. So I don't think we're behind in terms of that, but yeah, they do get it in different places, and I don't know if we're always reaching them maybe in the places that they're getting it.
They're the ones who are predominantly in favour of independence. I mean, poll after poll shows that, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I think we can overplay the idea that other parties have got massive resources on the doorsteps, because I don't think they do. I certainly haven't seen any. That what they do have is a lot more money, a lot of it coming up from down south, which is something that Marlene and I, we've been doing a 2-woman campaign against this.
So one of the areas that is part of Falkirk East and Linlithgow is Grangemouth. So that's, of course, been in the news so much. What are you picking up over there? I mean, what are people saying? And is that going to be something that is going to help your campaign?
I don't know whether it helps or not. To be honest, it's a burning sore that it's sort of gone down the tubes over lack of investment over a long period of time, and there's that betrayal that it wasn't saved as Labour promised the last time, and the feeling that had it been in England it would have been. But that is now done, unfortunately, and what we need to focus on is getting the jobs there for the future and making sure that we don't lose the skills in the short term, because that's the very real risk, that we then end up in a very weak position. And I think Project Willow, which is the sort of the INEOS-backed report supported by both governments, is fine in what it says and does or proposes, but it's jobs tomorrow where we need them today, and it's years down the line. So I don't think it's anywhere near quick enough. But it's a starting position rather than a sort of end game. It's the way I'm looking at it. But we need to see a lot more action faster, and I think people just don't have confidence in any politicians to deliver, unfortunately, and that's why I'm not sure if it's a beneficial thing for anybody. It's sort of scunnered folk, and they just think they've been betrayed, and who can trust. So we've got to rebuild that trust. So that's if we can do that, and if we can get jobs in there faster, then it's probably a vote winner for 5 years' time. But now we've got to convince folk that we're on their side, and we are on their side, but we've got to convince them of that and show them results, and that will be the proof of the pudding.
Yeah, we can't really wait 5 years, can we? Because
no.
Yeah, it's more urgent than that. What are you finding then when you're out and about? What are the main topics that are coming up?
It's everything and anything. I think the big change in the attitude on the doors is that we're getting a hearing from a lot of people that wouldn't have given us a hearing before. That's not to say they're going to rush to the polls and support us or anything, but it tells us that previous opponents that would not have given us house room are not sure what they're doing, and they're willing to consider things. And that's an opening. We have to make the most of it. We've probably got the most positive package of any of the parties, out there at the moment. So that hopefully gets through to a few people, but the media's not on our side. We have to take the message to people ourselves, and it's a slow process. With the best will in the world, we're not going to get round more than a small proportion of the electorate.
I think though the SNP manifesto launched today, the press questions were such pure pantomime villainy that I think that might well be work in our favour, because it was just how you could rile up so many people with the idea that you don't want people to go hungry. My goodness, you communists! It's just ridiculous, the response. You were there. We spotted you in the hall. What was that? What was the feeling like?
Well, the atmosphere is very positive. I mean, we're all out campaigning all the time, and so you've got different aspects of when we get together. There's the camaraderie of actually getting to speak to your fellow colleagues and largely hear that they're experiencing the same kind of reactions that you are. So you feel, this is really positive right across the country. And then John's delivery, I thought, was excellent. Some of the things that were
very good
really gave us, positive messages to give to people, and all of that just feels really good, So we've got less than 3 weeks to go now. Obviously 3 weeks to get the results, but because the count the day after, which is something I've always argued for, by the way. However, it does mean there's a slight delay in whatever happens next, and I suppose I'm sitting wondering, well, what is my diary going to look like in a month's time? And a bit of us thinking the same, we just don't know.
Be very, very full, or perhaps quite empty. Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed and try and that will be very, very full. And at least you've had the experience of that. I mean, it must be a big learning curve going down and finding yourself finding your feet down at Westminster. So at least you've had that experience. But there also must be a steep learning curve for people going in as new MSPs actually as well. So
there must be. I mean, I had the benefit in 2015 of having been a councillor for 16 years, so I dealt with constituent cases, and you're dealing with the same people but on different issues. So it's you just find out who you chase. So that part of it was relatively straightforward. The bit that comes as a surprise probably to new people is the amount of sort of scrutiny that you then become under. You get spotted, you go out for a meal or something like that, everybody knows who you are, and you don't get that quite, that's fine and up to a point. And also having to employ staff, which for many of us was a completely new experience. So I think ironically I just got my office structured the way that I was kind of working comfortably, probably in the sort of 6 months before the last election. So we didn't really get the bit. However, I have learned all those lessons. So I will be better prepared. And I mean, there's a good few of your, your comrades from that cohort that joined in 2015 down to Westminster who might well be joining you in Holyrood. I mean, there's quite a few ex MPs, isn't there? The numbers changed a little as the campaign went on, but I think it's either 10 or 11 now.
It's quite a lot. And do you think it's going to be different once you get into Holyrood? Because it's a different, it's a proportional parliament for one thing, but it's supposed to be consensual politics, not this adversarial.
I've been watching it from outside, and I don't think it's as consensual as it was a number of years ago.
I agree with that. But that's largely, I think, from some individuals, including Douglas Ross, for one, who've come up from Westminster and started that attacking thing.
I was never a fan of the Yaboo Sucks approach at Westminster anyway, so I won't be bringing those traits back. But I think there's other things we can learn from our experiences, and I look at it from outside, but I think the balance of work's a bit different, and so I think the MSPs can be a lot more intensive on the cases that they're working on. They can be much more into it, whereas when we were at Westminster, I mean, the number of inquiries we got was just silly numbers, and the number of sort of even standard campaign emails was silly numbers, and you spent a lot of time dealing with that, and I think there's much more you can do if you can get your sleeves rolled off and get actually into the issues that folk are dealing with. I think there's maybe some things we need to try and get changes to in the Scottish Parliament. I don't know whether we'll be successful in this, but if I look at them, and I think there's some real positives in the way that the Scottish Parliament works compared to Westminster. First up, the committees don't sit when the chamber's in session, so that's a clear dividing line. So at Westminster there was always 3 or 4 things happening at the same time, which was bonkers in my opinion. So they're better organised there. The legislation, when bills go through, they don't set up an ad hoc bill committee for each piece of legislation. It goes through one of the standing committees, and I think people can get the experience and knowledge on that area. That's really beneficial. I think where there's maybe a weakness is that the committees maybe think a bit more in sort of silo mentality. So one committee has the remit for that, the other committees don't look at it, where quite often maybe there needs to be a bit more joined up working.
That's interesting.
So that, whereas when I was at Westminster, we had no qualms about having joint committee meetings and things. So I think there's things there that we need to evolve.
They sometimes have an observer, or you have a guest member, but it's not joint working in the way you're describing. I can see that would be better.
Do you think, Martyn, that there might come a time, I mean, maybe sooner rather than later, where Holyrood has to expand to have more MSPs? I sometimes think, God, 60 people running a country.
I've thought that for some time, and it's not probably fashionable in the public eye to say we should have more politicians, but I think we probably should have. Holyrood's powers have expanded since 1999 when it was set up. There's limited numbers of people for backbench positions and committees when you take out the government side. So there's probably a role for more MSPs. Yes, and that then opens up the argument of, well, how do you do that? How do you increase the numbers? Do you increase the proportionality element? Do you change the whole system like the Welsh have just done and go for proper?
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how it pans out in Wales. But I mean, the other thing that we've come up a lot in discussion over the last, well, certainly the last year, is the idea of local democracy being much more local. And, you know, if you've ever listened to Leslie Riddick, you know, she describes how the size of our councils are just out of line with everything that you would have in Europe. They're just ridiculously big. So if there was more getting pushed down, maybe there was more things you could focus on in Holyrood.
Yeah. Well, I'm not averse to that, although I don't think anyone's actually proposing a sort of local government, you know, root and branch overhaul at the moment. But yeah, I look at the kind of mix of communities that I've represented over the years, and every sort of town and village feels isolated from the sort of council, you know, to an extent. And it's probably a symptomatic of that, you know, if we had more smaller local councils, people might feel more pride in their area. There might be more engagement. You know,
I mean, I live in Clackmannanshire, and that is the wee county is the smallest one by. It's still bigger than the average, 3 times bigger than the average in Europe. But I have to say, having previously been the chair of our local development trust, for example, the amount of interaction we had with the council was hugely easier because there was it was such a small council. They all knew each other. We knew them. They knew us.
I mean, I'm in Glasgow, Martyn. I mean, even in Glasgow, you know, if it was, Glasgow's huge, and you know, it would probably be better here as well if it wasn't just one big, you know, council, but split into, I don't know how many, half a dozen or something. You know, you would feel more part of it, and obviously people would have to work together, and you know, if you're a council boundary next to somebody else's, you'd be working with them, and it just sort of seems it could open the door to just being a lot more kind of creative. Well, working together, but doing that quite creatively. Anyway, as you say, no one's got. It's not on the job of work at the moment. We've got other things. Maybe once we get independent, we'll be able to kind of start thinking about those sorts of big changes. Really.
Well, that is when we need to start looking at that. I think the model for going forward after.
Yeah, but let's go back then to what is on the manifesto. What's your favourite bit? What are you really pleased to see there?
Well, I mean, there's so many positive aspects in there, and I think, you know, there's always been a lot of coverage on John's comments on the sort of basket of essential food items, you know, price capping sort of there, even in a limited form, and I think that's a kind of really clever way of showing what could be done with the limited powers we have by using health powers. Now,
that was clever, I thought.
I've been on the case of wanting a proper food and nutrition policy for a very, very long time, and I've came to the conclusion that the way you need to tackle it is you need to tackle ultra-processed foods. We have the consumption of that in Europe, you know, worst part of the UK for it. And I think the answer there is if we had tax powers, which we don't have, so you can't do what I would like to do, is put a polluter pays tax on these ultra-processed foods and use the proceeds to subsidise healthy foods and, you know, move the agenda that way. But we don't have the ability to do that. So I think John's came up with a practical solution in a very difficult time period to try and alleviate some of the worst poverty cases that are out there in rising prices. So a good initiative. And I think also the putting a cap on bus fares, which
that was great.
We need to get more people out of their cars and using public transport if we want a better public transport system. And you know, if you're sitting with a car in the driveway, then you're going to jump in it, you know, unless it's cheap enough to do the alternative, and there is a practical alternative for routes and availability. So this all helps in moving it in that direction. So I'm very pleased with that, and given that we've frozen, you know, rail fares and got rid of peak rail fares, something on the bus side, you know, was essential. I mean, it's probably been a couple of years since I got a bus from Linlithgow to Falkirk, and you know, the bus stop is closer to my house than the railway station, but the price was the same. So you know, that's, you know, and took a bit longer. So you think, well, that's going to make a difference.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, though. The more people you get on there, it creates a demand, and therefore you would think it would improve the service. I mean, I noticed that I think there was places in Australia had actually taken the decision to make public transport free as a measure against the consequences of the Trump's illegal war in Iran and the prices. I think a £2 bus fare cap's a really good start.
It's a kind of practical thing that people can see a difference of locally, and we need more and better bus services, but this is a way of getting people onto them and hopefully get that extra bit of traction.
Yeah, definitely.
I think the other one that's interesting in it is the pledge for new home buyers to get up to £10,000, and that's got to help with younger families trying to get their first home. Hopefully it helps with a bit in the building industry as well, if we can stimulate that additional demand and take some of the pressure off housing. So,
have you got building going on around your way?
There is in different places, yes. It's an area that people do want to live in and builders want to build in because they can get a premium on houses. There's also, I'm pleased to say, been some council building as well. So, we've got some of the affordable properties too, so we need a lot more of them because there is incredible demand, and part of that is the society we now live in. There's so many single families, and everybody's looking for their own property.
Indeed, I really liked the school bag, the school bag, just because of it's a bit like the baby box. It's sort of saying every kid deserves the best start, and whatever your circumstances. I thought that was a nice. Something to do with our values, actually, that one. Yeah. But the other one I liked was the mansion tax and the private jet tax. I mean, absolutely, we should be doing that. I can't wait to see that one come in.
Yeah, well, it sends a signal, and hopefully it catches Mr. Trump when he comes to visit his golf courses.
Oh, yeah.
Well, yes, indeed. Yeah. I mean, there's the other thing, really, land reform. I would like to have seen more about that, frankly, but maybe that's to come.
There's certainly been quite a few land reform bills over the years in the Scottish Parliament. I think almost every term's probably had. Yeah,
it's true actually. Although
they just seem to get weakened, and somewhere between starting them off with such aspiration, and then by the time it ends up, you go, "Oh, is that it?"
Yeah. Well, I mean, because we're in touch with, particularly Craig Dale in Commonweal quite a lot, and revive people, and it's kind of like you kind of know what they're going to say. There's something, that's good, that's a move in the right direction, but it's only like it's only one step, and obviously end up people feeling those sorts of people anyway, sort of feeling frustrated with it. And I guess also there's just the thing about the lobbying that goes on at Holyrood. Well, of course, there's so much lobbying goes on down at Westminster as well. I mean, probably even more so. But there is lobbying that goes on in Westminster. And obviously, if it's land reform, these big estates, have got quite a weight of behind them. But I suppose you just gradually do it, gradually bit by bit, and end up somewhere a bit better than having half the country owned by, 420 people, something like that.
Yeah.
Well, you've touched on one of the other positives of the Scottish Parliament is the lobbying procedures and rules, because they do keep a much better track of things than Westminster.
Yes.
So, and I think that transparency is to be welcomed,
It's good. Well, it's good to see, but you can still look at it and think, how come they've got that access? We're never happy. So, if we roll ourselves forward to imagine that there's an SNP majority, let's go for the big one. What do you expect to be the next thing that happens to progress independence sort of on the 8th of May? What's going to happen?
Let's give them a day off.
The 9th. Have the 9th then.
Well, we've probably got a couple of weeks, because we don't. The only date I know to keep free at the moment is in event of being successful, which we hope we will be. The 14th, the week after the election day, is the swearing in. The election of the presiding officers and the deputies. I have no idea what comes after that procedures. However, I think John's been pretty clear that he wants a referendum in 2028, and I think that is the correct timescale to be arguing for one. So I will be there supporting whatever calls he makes, and we just have to ramp up the public demand for it, and it's a democratic demand, whether people agree or disagree with the concept of independence. We should have the right to decide at any point that we choose if we are a voluntary union, So, and we need to exercise that right before the UK goes full on Farage and potentially in 2029. That is a frightening potential prospect. So, if we're lucky, that prospect might never come to pass, but looking at the polls just now, it's a real risk, and we need to make sure we've pressed that button, I think, before we get to that stage. So
you're likely to have some reform MSPs because of the proportional system, which will keep them in check, so it's not in a terrible thing. Do you have any thoughts on how are you going to handle them?
Well, I'm a big fan of history, and I read all sorts of history. But there was a Bedouin freedom fighter that fought the Italian fascists by the name of Omar Mukhtar. He used to be on the Libyan banknotes, which is a complete trivial piece of history. But during his fighting of the Italian fascists, and it was pretty guerrilla warfare stuff, the Italians did massacre some of his Bedouin people's villages, and some of his people wanted to fight similarly and attack the Italian homesteads, and his approach was, they are not our teachers. And I think that is a really powerful. We have to hold ourselves to a higher standard than our opponents. We don't get down to their level if it's dirty and nasty. We've got a higher position that we need to keep, and if we want to take people with us, I think that in the long run is beneficial. So
I like that. Yes, that's good.
Because it's a proportional system, it's a safety net in a way. There isn't that safety net in Westminster.
No.
If they get past that tipping point, they will sweep in. Whereas it's never going to be like that with a proportional system. But they will get seats. I mean, I was looking at that poll that came out the other day. I mean, it looked like the Greens would probably be the second biggest party, followed by Reform, and then Labour's behind that, and then I think Lib Dems and the Tories, and the odd independent maybe. But it does mean that they're constrained. I mean, if they want to do something, they're going to have to soften their demands, and they would need to be trying to be, a bit more creative in how they interacted. But somehow you can't quite imagine Reform UK being like that.
I do wonder what the reaction will be when the penny drops that the Scottish Parliament has absolutely no control over immigration, which seems to be the only thing
It will be, and I have heard it said that actually they're going to spend the next 2 years just using us as a big test bed and practice lines and see which things cut through and which things don't for when they get to the general election. But just you mentioning when you were talking about that Bedouin story, what popped into my mind was, of course, Falkirk has had its issues with the Asylum Hotel, and we have seen some disgraceful scenes by thugs really pretending to protect women and children, which are perfectly happy not to be protected by that kind of thug, thank you very much. But that sort of rising above it and trying to keep ourselves the kind of society we want to be, welcoming, it's more important than ever, isn't it? How do you think you're going to be able to deal with that Falkirk situation?
Well, I think we just have to. I mean, I've made a kind of different point of trying to get round some of our Asian and ethnic communities' businesses during the campaign. Some of the East Europeans, some of the other ones, and they're really valued members of our society, and they've felt that extra bit of threat and pressure because of these demonstrations, and none of that's acceptable at all. So it's making sure people know that they're valued and they've got a good place in our society, and I've been very heartened by some of the reactions we've had from the different communities in the area. So most ordinary people are normal, sane, and appropriate. So it's a very small number of heed the buzz, and
Aye.
and they're not always local, either.
No.
Yeah. There are a small number, and they get a disproportionate amount of screen time and TV time and on the news. And I don't know. I just think at some point the BBC's going to realise they just kind of let loose something that they no doubt didn't intend, but.
And they thrive on any publicity. That gets their message to more of the audience that's receptive to it. Even when it's a counter protest, they get that extra bit of coverage. And really, what we want is give them radio silence, give them no coverage whatsoever.
Yeah. And the protests. The good thing is the protests, the anti-them protests, are always much, much bigger and much better attended, and that's where all the decent people are. But it's just a horrible thing that has been more visible, I think, in this election that just wasn't a feature in previous ones.
No, and all completely unnecessary. The Tories created such a toxic environment that they just made a problem that didn't need to exist. They removed the right for people to apply from asylum from abroad. That created an empire for criminal gangs to smuggle people in. Anyone that's here isn't allowed to work or rent whether asylum case has been processed, and then it was taking anything 18 months, some cases 2 years for cases to be heard. So absolute nonsense. That could be dealt with a stroke.
Hopefully that's something that once the elections passed, maybe some of the heat will go out of that. You don't know how much of it is tied in with the sort of reform campaign.
Yeah. So have you got a busy weekend coming up then, or back on the doorsteps?
Yeah, it's full on every day. I will admit there's been a couple of nights where I've been hoping, I kind of hope it rains tonight and I can take the night off, but when it's not, I think I've got a mountain of emails to get through. More every day. I have heard though, and I thought, well, I'm glad I'm not a regional candidate. I didn't bother going for the regional list. I thought I'm going to win this constituency here, and that's the bit I need to deliver. However, those that are regional and constituency candidates were telling me they were getting 2 sets of emails from the same people, because obviously the emails are going out to well, I don't know what to worry about, but then I've noticed in the last couple of days I'm getting emails from other constituencies. I've got nothing to do with my area, so maybe we're all getting stuff all the time.
We're really grateful for you giving up some of your time tonight and Friday evening and everything. And anyway, but we'll let you away to have a bit of relaxing, however it is that what you relax with. Yeah,
put your feet up and
put your feet up.
Pace yourself. There's another 3 weeks.
Yeah, a member of the public stopped me the other week. Just saw me going down the road and pulled over his car and had a chat with me. And he asked me that very question. He says, "How do you stay sane and relax?" And I says, "Well, I only worry about the things I can change. I don't worry about things I can't, because there's no point. And folk music, R&B, and I read history. Although at the moment I can't read anything. I've not got the time, but I do watch videos if I get a wee spare 20 minutes or whatever, so
that's great. That's good.
Well, best of luck for the rest of the campaign.
Absolutely.
Fingers crossed that you're successful. We're and thank you so much for joining us.
We'll be watching keenly on that evening as the results come in.
Well, that morning it'll be nearer lunchtime because of the Friday count, so.
Oh, that's right. Yes, right, so it is. I forgot that. I was thinking maybe the constituencies would go ahead, but no, that's right. It's Friday. Oh well, early night then.
On the Friday morning. So a couple of people have asked me how I will sleep. I'm thinking I'll have no problem sleeping when I hit that pillow. I'm more worried about waking up in time to get there for the start of the count. But
just hope you enjoyed that as much as we did. We really enjoyed talking to Martyn, and another one who would make a really good addition to Holyrood. You could just picture him there.
Yeah, really interesting kind of points that he made, because of course he was the MP for that constituency. It's not a complete overlap with the Holyrood, but he was the MP, so he's had experience down in Westminster for a fair number of years. He's obviously got some good ideas about how Holyrood can maybe benefit from some of that experience. but also ways in which the way that Holyrood works is definitely better than the way Westminster works. Anyway, really a good conversation.
This is the first of our double for this week. And come back on Friday when we have another SNP politician, Callum Kerr. That was in the course of a day trip that we took to Galashiels. We've got a really good bit of grassroots activity to cover there as well. So come back on Friday for Galashiels day trip.
Yeah, and if you've missed any of this coverage, you'll find it on our YouTube channel. All the videos are all there, and the audio versions are all on our website.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that. Don't forget to subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're listening on YouTube, you can click the little bell and you get a reminder whenever we put out a new episode, which is every Friday.
And sign up for our mailing list. You can do that from the website. And we always send one out at the beginning of each month to tell you what's happening. Last but not least, you can buy us a coffee on coffee.com.
And we'll catch you later. Bye now.